Welcome to the Fully Mindful podcast. I'm your host, Melissa. I designed this podcast for you. I'm so happy you're here. We are talking about what it means to live with more intention, creativity, and authenticity so we can make aligned connections. I'm a neurodivergent lawyer turned coach who found the healing power of breathwork and the powerful impact of mindfulness as we navigate this wild and beautiful ride of life. Here at The Fully Mindful, we dive deep with inspiring guests, share solo mini-sodes that are packed with tools you can apply immediately, and I mix it up a bit with tangents and sidebars where my friend and host of the New World Normal podcast, Debbie Harrell, joins us for some down-to-earth, sometimes random, but always meaningful conversations. If you're ready to breathe, reflect, and grow, you're in the right place. Let's get fully mindful. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to The Fully Mindful. Today, I'm joined by someone who embodies the art of balancing career, creativity, and deep inner work, Kate Yuoska. By day, Kate is a digital marketing professional, and her other passions lie in guiding others through yoga, breathwork, and wellness. With over 15 years of experience teaching yoga, Kate weaves the wisdom of movement, mindfulness, and nature into everything she does, whether it's leading a class, hosting retreats, or simply finding calm in the chaos of daily life. Kate and I are also co-hosting Sanctuary, a retreat this June that's all about reclaiming rest, connection, and presence. And in today's conversation, we're going to dive into Kate's journey, how she found yoga and breathwork, how she balances entrepreneurship with a full-time career, and what it means to stay true to your values as a woman in wellness. Let's get into it. Welcome, Kate.
Thanks for having me.
So fun to have you here, although it's funny to do this when we live in the same town and we get to see each other live, but it's fun to do it this way too. So
yeah.
Well, hey, let's just get into it. Your professional background seems, for some, maybe slightly different than what we would normally think of for people who teach yoga and breathwork and mindfulness. So you have a professional background in marketing, but obviously you have this other part of yourself. How did you find your way into this world of breathwork and yoga and that whole world when you have this whole other life?
Yeah, I don't know. To me, they kind of go hand in hand. I've always been a creative person and I studied marketing in college. So that's kind of where that stemmed from. And I worked in so many industries at this point, like healthcare, real estate, fashion, aerospace, insurance, finance, like just the whole, because marketing goes into every field. But with yoga, I mean, that was something I knew at a very early age. I think I was 26 when I did my first yoga teacher training. And it was just something that spoke to me, as an outlet. I knew I had some grounding that I needed. I needed like a sanctuary of my own to go somewhere to drop into my body, into the emotions that I was feeling at that age. And yoga seemed to really help, but I didn't really know why. So I did my first yoga teacher training. An interesting fact about me, and I'm very open about this, is that I've been in recovery for over 10 years now. And when I first entered yoga, I was very much in my active addiction. Even my first yoga teacher training, I don't really remember a lot of it. I was probably hungover for the majority of it. And I don't think I embodied who I am today by any means, but also just the wellness space. It was something that was like an ideal, something I aspired to be, but it wasn't something that I was really embracing as a part of myself. So it took many years to kind of get to that point of where I am today. Obviously my sober journey and all of that. But yeah, it's been a whole long path to get to the road of yoga and integrating that. And I feel like I have two careers now at the same time. So I have my full-time job by day, and then I also do my own yoga business, which I call Mystical Rituals, is kind of my personal brand. And that's where I offer breathwork and yoga and retreats and events and all that. So yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, but that's kind of in a long way.
Great. I mean, you and I'm very open about my own recovery as well. And I was laughing because I could relate, not because, it's just sort of a funny thing to be deep into one's addiction, whatever that may be for somebody, and then trying to find our way to wellness, sort of
I know.
blindly
Yeah.
following that. I remember I was living in the Bay Area and I was searching for all kinds of answers because I
Yes.
think that's sort of a commonality among those of us before we get to recovery. We're kind of trying to find some solution, I guess. And you were looking for it in yoga, and I was looking for it in a place called the Berkeley Psychic Institute, which is not at all about becoming a psychic, but about becoming more attuned to our intuitive
That's
ways. And I remember this one teacher kind of looking at me, and she was very nice, and she just was like, you may want to stop drinking a little bit. That might be helpful for your journey. I didn't come into the classes drunk or anything, so she just was
yeah.
obviously very attuned to her own intuitive. I remember thinking, maybe this isn't for me.
Yeah, I'd be like, you know what? I have my own agenda
Yeah,
here.
I think, yeah, maybe I was just not a very well person at the time. So I was kind of giggling there that, we were looking for an answer, but maybe we don't exactly want the answer that is before us at that moment. And we end
Right.
up coming to it later, right?
Yeah, and that my first training I've done three now since then, and I think there's a kind of a parallel path when it comes to recovery, addiction, but also the journey of wellness and yoga. You never really reach that like point of being enlightened or the Buddha or recovered, right? Like you're always in this journey of seeking and journey and improving and recovering, right? Like it's just an ongoing journey, which I feel like that's probably why I was so drawn to yoga was just there's so many parallels between the 12-step program, yoga. I don't have a personal like program I work with like AA, for example. So yoga is sort of my recovery program and I've stuck with it for over 10 years. That's kind of what brought me in and what solidified it. But what I've realized over the years is my dharma, my purpose that I really feel connected to is inspiring others. And I found through the voice that yoga gives me that I'm able to do that. And it just lights me up. I just feel so alive when I'm teaching, doing workshops, retreats. It's like that's where I want to be.
Right.
And when you get that little sensation or ping or whatever you want to call it, like listen to that, I think is
Mhm.
just an offering I can share is because that's just when you're in that sort of state of flow, like you're just so immersed in the thing that you're doing that you just don't want to be anywhere else. And I think that's a very powerful voice to listen to.
Absolutely. It's interesting. There's a newsletter sitting in my email box that I'm very interested in reading by Arthur C. Brooks, who writes often for The Atlantic and has written many books about happiness. And the title, I'm paraphrasing it, of the newsletter is If You Want to Be Successful, Do What Makes You Happy. And it's like, that's what you're talking about, right? And
Yeah.
we often think that we have to be doing that professionally all of the time. I think, especially in the Western world, right? We have to be the yoga teacher 24/7. And maybe that would be wonderful. Who knows if you could eke out an amazing living being a yoga teacher 24/7. But maybe not, right? Like maybe we find true happiness by diving into all the things that we love. Maybe it's not just the one thing, right?
Right, right. Yeah, no, I love that. And I often think about that when, I'm speaking to friends or family members and they're like, I don't know, like, what's my next path? I've had some friends get laid off recently, and I
Yeah.
don't think it needs to be this like linear, trajectory of where you go next or what you do in life. It's like having that side hustle or hobbies. It's so popular nowadays to have, the sourdough bread making thing or the crafts or whatever it is. But like if it brings you joy, I think that is in such an important aspect. We have so little time on this earth. Why not do what you love? And I really try to embody that. And as I get deeper and deeper into my career, both in the digital marketing side and the yoga side, I think I've really carved out a balance for that of what I love doing and where I'm putting my time and energy.
Yeah. Well, was there a particular moment or experience that solidified that, hey, this yoga, this breath work experience is something that I do want to pursue. It wasn't just your personal practice, it's something that you really enjoyed. It was something that you really wanted to be able to offer to other people. Was there a pivotal moment for you when that became more clear for you?
Yeah. There's a saying that I love and I share it all the time of no mud, no lotus. And like recovery is where I got that from originally. But you have to go through the mud, the dirt, the darkness, the shit, the grit, right? To see the light, to blossom, to grow, transform, whatever you want to call it. And that was kind of my theme with my recovery journey. But I guess more recently, the past 5 years or so, I also was struggling with infertility.
Mm.
And it was just a really shitty road to be on. Like, as a woman at the time, I was 35 and I was like, this is all I want. It's all I could think about. We were also in a pandemic at the time. It was just like chaos. And, there's so many feelings that I was going through, inadequacy, societal demands, environmental demands, or whatever. And then just my inner family dynamic and just so many things. Yeah, it was rough and it got to the point of IVF as well. So like you can imagine it was the whole thing. And at some point I just said, if I'm not going to birth a real child, and I had to get real with that. I remember that wasn't even really a possibility in my mind, but I had to distract myself basically. And I decided that I'm going to birth something else that's a creative outlet for me so that I'm not so sad all the time.
Yeah.
So obsessed with, because if you've ever been in an infertility journey or not, doesn't matter, but it's a lot of tracking your cycle. It's a lot of medicine, just doctor's appointments and checking your calendar and not being able to travel, which is something that I'm obsessed with. So for a long time, it was just absorbing who I was. And it became this obsession, of getting pregnant, and mystical rituals was something that I was like, I'm going all in on this because I can't take this other side of my life that's happening right now.
Yeah.
And from that, I just started building my little brand. And, I say little, I don't have like a huge following on Instagram, and it's nothing that I, it's just me, really. I like all things mystical and magical, and I love little rituals that help build wellness and kind of just intuition, just feeling into your body, into your practice, whatever that might be. So that's where that pivotal moment came from.
Thank you for sharing that. And let me just say, like, yeah, thank you for your candid share. That is a very difficult experience to go through, and it's very intense. And yeah, and I mean, meaning just the collective, we get to benefit from your pain in the sense that we get to benefit from the fact that you've created mystical rituals, which is this really beautiful. For those of you who are listening and haven't experienced what Kate has to offer, is this really beautiful experience, because your yoga, your breath work, your retreats, are all based on nature and nature's natural movements, which is very interesting. And I'm wondering how that lines up with the experience that you went through. And, it's so, gosh, like science, everything's like you said, you have to track everything, you have to note everything, everything's so clinical, right?
Yes, yes.
And it's like you've swung the other way, right? And you've come to what we all experience in nature, and what is real, and what is connected to the seasons and the moon, and the things that are, I don't know, I guess I'm going to say more real, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Experience.
Yeah, and embodying in that, not just, I reached this point of acceptance of what is, which was very challenging. It's when you want something so badly, whether it be like a new job or a new partner or a baby, like it's really hard to accept the crappy situation that you're in. But when you can find acceptance, that's always been my ticket personally to freedom, is just finding acceptance in where you're at, making the best of it, no mud, no lotus again, and, figuring out a way to be happy and alive and live life to the fullest, even though that might not be bearing a child. I feel like I've taken it a different direction. And this isn't sciencey at all, although I love the science elements too, but I also like the whimsical, mystical side. And somewhere along the way, I took a tarot course, and my birth card is the Empress, which I have right behind me, so I'm gonna just pull it up. It just made me think of it. So this is
Oh, yeah.
her. It's a little box. But yeah, that's the Empress, and she embodies nature. She's the mother kind of symbol, or the divine feminine symbol. And she's like the symbol of fertility, actually, and all these things. So at the time when I got this reading, I was like, I'm destined to be a mother. And I think I am, but I do that in my own way through nurturing my students, nurturing my cats and my family, and their own way. And it's really strange too, because I I went from like not thinking about anything else than motherhood, and now I've embraced my life in such a big way that I'm like obsessed. I can't wait to get out of bed every morning. I love all the activities that I have planned each and every day. I go on so many trips. Last year alone, I was in Japan and Mexico. I went 3 times, which is wild. And I went to Poland. I went all over the place. And I just said to myself, if I can't do this thing, if this isn't happening, like, I'm just going to live my life lavishly and put out what I feel is my purpose and go with it.
And in living this life, you get to do all this stuff, right? So you have this digital marketing career, you have retreats, you teach yoga, you lead breathwork workshops. How have you managed to balance all of that? That's a lot. And you're married, I should add. And you
Yeah.
have cats. And
Okay.
and you have a life.
I do. I do. I mean, it's for me, I love spreadsheets. I love tracking. Like, that's what I had to do with the whole fertility thing. So I just make sure that my schedule isn't fully, that I'm not burning out. I make sure that there's a good balance, that my full-time job is, has everything's taken care of there, but I'm also able to put my time elsewhere, as with the breath work, with my events, my retreats. I kind of space things out so it just feels really manageable. And I can just feel within myself when things are getting too crazy, too much. Sometimes I go too hard and I have to kind of reel it back in. So, but when you don't have kids, you have more time, I think. So that's another thing too. I feel blessed that I have as much time as I do, and that I have flexibility in my days to kind of structure them how I need to get stuff done. I personally believe that sitting in meetings all day is just the biggest damn waste of time. So I feel very lucky in my job too that it's not as many meetings as other companies I've worked for in previous years. And yeah, it's just flexibility is important, and balance.
How do you know when you need to do something to avoid potential burnout or potential imbalance? Like, when do you feel that? How are you able to sense that coming on?
Let's take a quick break.
Hey there, fully mindful listeners. Did you know that I host in-person breathwork sessions every quarter in Portland at Kiva's beautiful sanctuary in Northwest Portland and at Flow Yoga in Hood River? Each session is perfectly timed with the seasons, offering powerful themes like peace and renewal, awaken and align, fire and flow, gather and ground, and inner hearth. Together, we'll dive deep into the conscious connected breathwork to explore, release, and transform. Can't make it in person? No worries. I also host online breathwork sessions every third Thursday of the month, except during holiday months, with 96-hour replays. So wherever you are, you can still join in. Visit thefullymindful.com for all the details. Let's breathe together.
I think it's a combination of things, but I hit kind of when there's like a saying for it with ADHD, and I was just watching a reel on Instagram for it, but I don't know, there's just this like, you're almost frozen, like this paralysis, like you have so many things to do and you don't even know which one to kind of tackle first because there's just so much. I think that's when I kind of get that red flag of like, I don't even know where to begin at this point, or where to put my energy. And sometimes it's like that. Like I need to build a playlist and I need to do a newsletter and I need to get a couple Instagram posts out. And oh my gosh, I forgot about this email I needed to send. And this person I haven't, and it just kind of explodes like that. That's the kind of chaos that I personally don't work well with. Especially being in recovery, I feel like a huge part of that is anxiety of why I drank. I drank to quell the noise, the chaos in my mind, in my life. For a while, it worked with drinking, and then, it didn't. So I crave calm and consistency and routine and organization just to keep things probably like the illusion that I'm in control, but I'm not really.
Right.
But for me, that's definitely the distinction. But even, last week, I told you my mom was in the hospital for a medical scare, and that just felt draining when I was experiencing it. And my mother lives on the other side of the country. I felt very isolated being here, and I had to reschedule my meeting with you because I just felt this need to take care of my own mental health in that moment, of like, I just needed space to be like, what was that? And I say this a lot in my breath work is that we as humans, as people, like we don't get the space to like feel the feels often. Like our lives are just so fast paced, especially as parents and as adults who have careers and have responsibilities. Like if you go through something that's very difficult, we don't often process it in a healthy way. And we just keep going and pushing things down or further in. And oftentimes they come out in other forms or in other ways that aren't the healthiest. So I guess it's a lot of inner listening too, of just knowing when to slow down, to pause, to check in and say, like, hey, something's not right. And I need to make some space to feel that, to look within. Usually I go for a walk in nature and like a long walk and just clear my head and ground with the earth. That's just something that's always helped me feel more connected. So
I think that's so important. And, really, I think it's so great that you took that opportunity last week to take care of yourself in that way, because like you said, we often do not. We might feel guilty about it, even if we do.
yes.
And I know I have. I mean, I certainly have taken care of myself and then I feel guilty about it. Like I get the shoulds, right? I should be doing this. I should be doing that. I should be doing that. And wow, I don't, that comes from, I guess, the Western culture that we live in that places so much pressure on us to be producing at all times, at all costs.
Yes.
Right? We
Yes.
overvalue the doing and we undervalue the being. And like you said, there is a consequence. Often I know that I have not taken the time to process what I need to process when I get sick. I'm not saying that there aren't also bacteria and viruses that are just going to get me no matter what, but I'm certainly more susceptible to them if I haven't been taking care of my emotional health and well-being. Right. If I've been shoving things down and just going for it,
Sure.
I'm definitely more susceptible to getting sick, because then my body's like, now you're down.
They're gonna take you down. Yeah.
Take you down, girlfriend. And you're
Right.
going to take the time. And I think that's, it's really important for us to get rest. And it's hard. Like you said, we live in a culture where there's that pressure to do things. I think, especially as women, there's that extra pressure. I'm not saying men don't have it too, but as women, we definitely have that pressure. We have to be all things to all people at all times. And if we slip up at any point, we're concerned we're going to disappoint somebody out there in the world, or at least that's definitely what I've experienced. So it's really important to know. And that's why I asked the question, how do you sense in your body, in your mind, when you're getting the red flags? And I think that was a perfect example of like, when I'm noticing, I don't even know when to begin. And I flashed to when I was a kid, when you said that. And, I have ADHD and I've had it my whole life. And when I was a kid, my nickname, I think it was meant to be loving, but I didn't like it at all. It was Miscellaneous Missy. And it was because I just was all over the place. And I had a very messy room. And I remember it was like time to clean the room. And it was like, I have no idea where to even begin.
Right. Right.
Sense of like honest overwhelm of like
Yes.
no idea where to begin. And I think that's when we know we've crossed that line,
Mm.
when we don't even know where to begin, when there's so many things that it's like I don't even know what the first thing is that is a priority here.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And that's huge. It's something that I always mention in a lot of my breath work and a lot of my classes too, is that our lives were never meant to be like this linear path. We ebb and we flow just like nature. Really holds true to me is that we move just as the moon. We have seasons, we have cycles. We are not separate from nature. We are nature. And remembering to slow down, remembering to pause, to have moments of, like you said, just being is so incredibly important. And for a lot of people, it's hard. Just like I tell people, come to my breath work, come to a meditation retreat, right? That we're hosting. And they're like, are we just going to be meditating the whole time? And it's not about that. It's what you like, what connects to you. You don't have to sit in a Buddha-esque way. Like my meditation is going for a nature walk,
Mhm.
and someone else's might be calling a friend. Like it doesn't have to be this yoga or yogic way of disconnecting. It's ultimately your way that makes the most sense for you, but it carving out the space to do that is really important.
Yeah, and I mean, to that end, many people think that they don't have time for self-care or mindfulness or yoga or anything. So I mean, what do you suggest to them in terms of integrating these practices into daily life?
Yeah, well, I think it's important to have an interest in it. So it doesn't, like my husband, for example, does not like the yoga world really. He'll do activities here and there, but like what helps him disconnect is completely opposite. But having that awareness of like what serves you to slow down, to pause, to create some space for mindfulness. Some people truly like to sit and meditate. Some people like to journal. Some people like to read. There's just so many outlets, and it's just about finding yours. And I think it doesn't have to be yoga, right? It doesn't have to be breath work. That is paths to wellness, but it's not the only path. So it's like, as a yoga teacher, I'm not even saying that yoga is the way to go because I know that there's just an endless amount of ways to slow down and take time for self-care. And it doesn't have to be this huge chunk of time either, even 10 minutes, or just being more mindful in the activities that you're doing. If you get up and walk around the house and switch gears for some time so that you clear your head and you're not just sitting at the desk all crunched up. There's a great book, Atomic Habits, right? That like just kind of says to take those like micro habits and it makes this really big thing happen.
I like that. I think my first meditation perhaps was probably running. And
Yes.
I mean, it's a beautiful meditation because what are you doing? You're feeling your feet hit the ground, you're listening to your breath, you're paying attention to your breath, you're paying attention to your body, and eventually the mind slows down.
Mm-hmm.
It's a pretty remarkable experience. And I remember trying to talk to somebody about it, and they kind of dismissed me. And then one of my meditation teachers was like, absolutely, that's absolutely meditation. And I felt very validated. So it's like the same thing. My husband, I mean, he's done breathwork sessions with me and he likes it. He's done yoga and he likes it, but it's not his thing, right?
Right.
And it's being out in nature and mountain biking or skiing or something like that. And so it can very well be something far more active. It doesn't have to be sitting on a cushion or doing an asana or whatever. Although what's wonderful about those practices is they can get you. I think what I like about yoga or breath work or any of those practices, and you can also get there with running or biking or anything else, is you're committed to, like, if you sign up for a yoga class or a
Mm-hmm.
breathwork class or a retreat, or you commit to your friend that you're going on a bike ride or a ski trip or whatever, is you're now committed to doing it. It's
Yes.
more likely to actually do it.
stick with it.
I do love those daily practices where you can, oh, you know what, I'm just going to get up and go for a walk around the house, even. Or when I'm washing dishes, I'm really going to pay attention to what the sensation of washing dishes is like. Or when I sip this tea, I'm really going to sip this tea and see what that feels like.
Yeah, just moments of mindfulness, that we don't always have a lot of time in the day, but those little micro moments can, or rituals, if you want to call them those, they can add up to something that's really healing. If you take the day as like a cumulative piece. But you're right, with yoga, with breath work, with something like a class or something that's a little bit more active, it just drops you out of that monkey mind, all the other stuff, the chaos that's happening in your life. And it just brings you into a space where you can be in your body, be with your breath, be with the action that's taking place. And yoga, we all know there's lots of science behind yoga and breath work of that it does the job as far as wellness is concerned. But to me, the most important thing is what inspires you, what lights you up, like what gets you out of bed every morning. And doing that is ultimately going to be the best thing for you, and like if it is yoga, keep doing that. If it's dancing, do that. Like what, like that's just, and I often see so many people like at the gym on a treadmill, just, like a little hamster. And if that's your thing, amazing. But like, I don't know, to me, I'm like, there has to be more than that. There's a whole big world out there. Like there's so much activity, and I just encourage to find that mindfulness or wellness in ways that really inspire you and lift you up. And for me, it's yoga for sure. It's breath work. I remember my first breath work session. I was like mind blown, as you probably were too. Just how you're taken to an alternate universe almost in your own mind without drugs,
Right.
completely natural.
Crazy
Yeah.
thoughts. Just kidding.
Yeah. Just because I'm, now sober doesn't mean those thoughts went away, right? They're very much still there. So breath work was very cool. And a lot of people in recovery like breath work too, because of, you kind of feel like this starts to get quiet and you start to go into a more, I don't know, you're in that space of your subconscious mind and the emotion mind. And it's just nice in that space. So breath work can be a really beautiful practice too, for sure.
And for those who are listening who are like, breath work, I just like what, show up and breathe. Like
Oh
what's
yeah.
that? Yeah. So maybe say a little bit about what you mean by breath work.
Oh yeah, that's such a good distinction because again, I've had so many people say like, I can't meditate for an hour, I can't breathe for an hour. That was actually my thought. And at the time I was a yoga teacher, I was so resistant to it. But it's actually conscious connected breath work, which is, I call it dancing breath because you're kind of like creating your own rhythmic breathing to the breath. And while it is sort of laborious, like you are doing an active breathing technique the entire time, I would say that who's ever guiding you, you start to just move into your own journey, and that breath just becomes this thing that's sort of happening automatically, and you're just going into your own little space. So it's a guided breath technique that drops you out of your logical mind and brings you into an altered state, or it can, and it's magic.
Yeah, I echo that. I know I had a student once who she was just being very honest with me. And she said, I came here because a friend of mine just told me to come here. And I thought, why am I paying money to go just lay on the ground and breathe? That just seems really weird. And then she sat up after we were done and she said, holy shit, I had no idea
That's the
that's what
best.
we were going to do. And, so I guess for anyone listening who's curious about it, I think you just have to sort of check it out and see if it's something that works for
True. Yeah, and not to have any expectations in your mind because it's a ride. Sometimes it's this mellow stream, sometimes it's this wild river. You never really know what will arise as our energy is always changing, but it can be a really powerful practice for sure.
that friend who recently tried an online session with me, a group that I was leading, and she had never done it before. And she said she was a few minutes in and she had to get up and like she had to run out of the house or something. And then she talked herself into coming back and finishing, and she had a great session. But anything can happen, right? And other people just have a very like you said, a gentle stream kind of mellow session. You don't have to have some major upheaval, but whatever it is, it can be a really powerful, very different thing than probably anything that you've ever experienced.
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen, and those of you listening, the images on Instagram, maybe not if that's not your thing that you're into, but sometimes I get fed ads where people are having these like profound experiences and they're like shaking and crying, and I'm just like, well, like that's not really always the case. Sometimes maybe, but so
Yeah.
it's really an inner journey,
Yeah.
and it's a beautiful way, like we were talking about earlier, that we don't often get to feel our feelings as we could or even should. And breathwork is a very profound way to bring out some of that stuff that you might subconsciously be holding on to that you didn't even know you were, which is kind of cool. Sometimes I have a direction that I want to focus on. I'm like, I'm going to think about this, or I'm going to manifest this in my breathwork, whatever it might be. And then the breath guides me somewhere
Right.
else that I needed to get into and feel and release.
I think that's the beauty of it, right? It's just like anything else we do. Life is, I think, what was didn't John Lennon say this? Life is what happens when you're busy making other plans.
Mhm.
It's just like that in breath work or even yoga, right? We set intentions and then we can promptly forget about them because whatever's going to happen is what's going to happen, and that's what's meant to be.
Yes, I was making plans to have a child, right? And my life that was happening was all this other stuff unfolding that, it's kind of always there. I just never fully embraced it. And when I really leaned into it, I was like, aha, like this. And it's just been a wonderful but wild ride ever since, and really lovely. So, uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and we touched on this before. So much of what you do is based on nature and the moon and the sun and natural rhythms. Like, why has that been such a guiding force for you?
If we talk about astrology, I'm a Cancer sign. So I run my life based on emotion, and the moon governs the Cancer sign. It's also a water sign. And I don't know, that's something that I guess, uncovering. I just think to me, it's so incredibly fascinating how nature guides us, how the moon's been our natural timekeeper since the beginning of time. And it's a force that's so much bigger than us, right? And at the same time, it's also within us. I think it's incredibly powerful to use nature as a guide. It's kind of, to me, like my higher power. Yeah.
That definitely resonates for me. I do 12 step. That is part of my story. And one of the things that has always been challenging for me is the reliance on higher power. I don't have any problem with the concept. I just had a
Yeah.
problem with me actually connecting with that. And it wasn't until I realized, like, oh, it could be nature, right? It doesn't have
Yes.
to be
Yeah.
something that is separate from me. And part of 12 step talks about having a connection with something that's inside ourselves. And I was like, okay, nature is something that is inside myself. And so that also resonated for me in the way that it sounds like it resonates for you.
Yeah. Big time. Big time. Yeah. And one of my retreats I just did in February, it was called Elemental. And a lot of that was just the recognition of the 4 or 5 elements being in us, and also, out in the cosmos. And it's that like macrocosm, microcosm, like everything is interconnected. And that theme plays out in so many things that I'm personally into, like the tarot, yoga, with the chakras, with like as above, so below. Like it's all connected. And I love learning that stuff. Like this year, my goal was to deepen my knowledge of astrology. The more I dive into spirituality and the kind of yoga philosophy, and even just stuff on mental health and psychology, I'm just like, yep, that checks out. That makes sense. Like, um, and some of it's just absolutely mind blowing. I just think like there's a whole world, and I can't wait to learn more and dive more into all these little topics. I have this very deep curiosity for all things mystical and spiritual and cosmic
You
or
know,
natural.
for those who are maybe not watching but are listening, Kate is wearing these beautiful earrings. Yeah.
Yeah. Full moon, crescent moon, I'm not really sure, but I love them.
And you and I are co-hosting Sanctuary Retreat in June, kind of about reconnection with nature and ourselves, and what inspired you to create this and be part of Sanctuary. And who is it for, do you think?
Yeah, those are great questions. Well, what inspired me, and I think us, is we need a little sanctuary right now with the chaos that's happening out in the world. It's especially this year, it feels like it's hitting pretty hard. And if I open my phone one more time and it says like breaking news, it's just like, oh, I'm so over that. You need a break sometimes, and I think that's what Sanctuary is offering, is a break. It's that pause for you in the way that you might need it. And we'll offer things like breathwork, meditation, yoga, and some creative outlets, some workshops and things like that. But it's also just a space to like just be. And that's what I love so much about it. When you showed me the space, Melissa, I was like, wow, like that is a magical space. And personally, I actually haven't been there yet, but I could tell even just through the images that it was incredible, because it's like it's a Buddhist sanctuary, it's a Druid sanctuary. Like it sounds like a joke when like you're telling people about it, like a Buddhist priest met a Druid priest and they made a farm. But the grounds are so lovely. You like the Mount Adams view is lovely. There's a labyrinth. Apparently UFO activity, which is so cool. Apparently an energetic portal, which I don't know anything about, but I'd love to learn about it. So to me, it's just a place to land, to let go of the outside world, the noise, and just give yourself some space to be with what's going on, whatever that might be for you.
Let's take a quick break.
So what if you could escape to a peaceful retreat without booking even a flight? This June, just a short drive from Portland in the Gorge, I'm teaming up with Kate Yuoska of Mystical Rituals to bring you the Sanctuary Retreat, a weekend together for deep rest, connection, and presence at Trout Lake Abbey. You'll experience vinyasa and yin yoga, guided meditation in a sanctuary that looks straight out of the Lord of the Rings, transformative breathwork, and nourishing meals to feed your body and soul. And at night, you'll rest under some of the most beautiful skies in the Pacific Northwest, maybe even spot a UFO or two. Who knows? No distractions, no stress, just space to breathe, move, and be. Join Kate and me this June at Trout Lake Abbey. Your sanctuary awaits. Spots are limited, so reserve yours now at thefullymindful.com. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. And I think it is an incredibly beautiful place. Trout Lake Abbey is one of the most beautiful places I've ever been to. And when you came up with the title Sanctuary, I was like, oh, that's perfect, because that's exactly what it feels like there.
I didn't know that there was a sanctuary in.
There literally is a sanctuary.
Yes, which made it even more like, that's the stuff that I just love, those little like kismet moments where you're like, that makes, it all connects. So yeah, and I would say who this is for, retreats are just a wonderful reset. If for those of you listening that have never been on a retreat before, whether it's ours or just someone that you heard of, do it. Like I go to them as much as I can, as much as I take them myself, because they're just such a magical way to connect with like-minded humans, to be vulnerable in a really safe space, and to just, like I said, get away from it all. It's this wonderful reset. I like to use them as a way to just kind of reignite that little spark within, just to check back in with myself and then walk away feeling replenished, restored, and inspired, hopefully, back into my daily life. But they're wonderful retreats. And you don't need to know how to properly do yoga or meditate or any of it. It's more just if you can, show up and be yourself and eat good food.
I know people, I think, often think, oh, I have to be like some sort of bendy yogi or something. That's like,
Yes.
you don't have to, you could literally just lay on your back the entire time in Shavasana, and that would be cool.
or pose, right? That's the
Or
best,
toes.
the
Yes.
most important pose of the practice, to be honest. And you'd still be getting wild benefits just from doing that. So, with all my retreats that I host and even ones I go to, everything's optional. Like
Yeah.
you choose the journey that you want to take. We put things on the schedule, but everything is
Choose your own adventure.
option. So.
Yeah. Well, so for someone who's been teaching yoga for over 15 years, how has this whole experience evolved for you? We've just been talking about retreats and breath work and yoga. Like, obviously, 15 years of this, things have changed for you.
In so many ways, I used to be so scared to teach, to show up in front of a group and to be perfect. That was always my big thing. I had to teach a perfect class every single time. But at some point, I just said, fuck it. I just stopped caring. I always fuck up my lefts and rights when I teach. And some of the compliments that I've received about my teaching is that, like, Kate, we love you because you're human. Like you make mistakes and you laugh at yourself and like we have a good time and a good class. And I guess, yeah, just being real. And I've also, in 15 years, have let go of that fear and that pressure I put on myself talking in front of groups. I've thankfully just now I feel like very comfortable in that space. And I think that's a skill that, I mean, maybe some people just have it and that's amazing. But for me, it took a lot of years to feel that and to gain that confidence. So very happy that I can just kind of show up and be my authentic self at this point and teach to my students from that heartfelt, authentic space without that inner dialogue of like, you need to be perfect, like don't mess it up and all that like inner chatter. Of course, she's still there, but she's a lot more quiet and it's a lot more of me and standing tall. And I hope to continue that going forward and also to release limiting beliefs that I often put on myself. 5 years ago said, there's no way you would host an international retreat. You can't do that. Who would come? And I sold it out my first one this past year. And I plan on doing many more. So like to get that inner critic out it's just noise. I'm not sure there was any even truth to the stuff I was telling myself. The more I lean into the authenticity, the more I'm like, wow, like I just keep expanding. And it's really lovely to see that. And I'm like thinking like, what else? What's
Yeah.
next?
No, I love that. And actually, you must have been intuitive because one of the questions that I do like to sort of end with or wrap up with is, if people are listening, what kind of advice might you give them if they're feeling stuck and you just did it? In your own experience, you gave advice in your own experience, which is my favorite kind, right?
Yeah.
So what are you working on? I mean, obviously we have this upcoming retreat, but what other things are coming down the road for you, whether it's, digital marketing or yoga or breath work? What else are you excited about for this upcoming year?
I have a bunch of places I got my eye on in Asia that I'm planning on going to. So that's been exciting to plan. I have 3 retreats down the pipeline. The one that you and I are hosting in June. I have one in fall and next winter coming up that I'm planning. And yeah, just moving my breath work online and in person, which is exciting. You and I have talked about that. I build websites as well for mental health professionals and wellness professionals that own a small business. So I've been doing those as well. I just keep learning. I think I'll take that astrology course because it just keeps calling me. So we'll see. But yeah, I have my vision board I created for the year. Highly recommend doing that if you don't do that. It's whether you do it digitally or just journaling or like visually, it's a really fun practice. I'm turning 40 this year, and I know. So I'm going on a little pilgrimage, I'm calling it, to Sedona for myself before I turn 40. It's just kind of like my last goodbye to being in my 30s, but also just as a grounding tool of just, taking some time to think about a decade. So yeah, I'm excited for that too.
It is exciting. Anything that you were hoping we would talk about that we didn't get a chance to talk about?
Wow, we talked about so many things. I really appreciated the conversation and the thoughtful questions. I'm an open book when it comes to topics and things. So if there's a question that someone might have had that we didn't answer, happy to answer later, but I appreciate you having me on.
Where can people find out more information about you? What's the best place they can go look?
Yeah, Mystical Rituals is my website. So it's mystical dash rituals or hyphen. And then my Instagram is mystical mystical dot rituals, because Instagram, of course, stole all the other variations. Yeah. So yeah, I'd love to connect with you on Instagram, or you can subscribe to my newsletter or just check out my website. But it was the first site I ever built. It's a really long time ago. So it needs a little refresh, but it's there. So yeah.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kate. And I know I'm looking forward to seeing you soon in real life. And
Yes,
I will see you at the retreat. Thank you for your offer to be available for questions should anyone have them. And with that, I will invite you back for another conversation soon.
Amazing. Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you for joining me on the Fully Mindful podcast. If you got value from this episode, I'd love for you to subscribe, leave a review, or share this episode with someone who'd love this content too. Remember, small moments of mindfulness can lead to big changes in your day-to-day life. Until next time, take a deep breath, stay present, and tap into your own mindfulness. I'll see you next week.